We're going to show you a part of Barcelona that many tourists never get to, and yet it's the real city. It's just north of the old town, north of Plaza Catalunya. It's the extension along Passeig de Gràcia, especially the main street. And this is Barcelona at its best. It was developed over 100 years ago as the city had to grow beyond the boundaries of its old Gothic quarter. And it is a prime example of urban planning that we can all learn from today. It's a very livable neighborhood. The buildings are human scale, maybe 5-6 stories high. They have central courtyards that let in the air and light and create quiet spaces for the apartments, and yet you're in the middle of the bustling city. And there are beautiful shops along Passeig de Gràcia and some architectural landmarks that we'll be showing you too, including some works by Gaudí. So we're going to walk along with our guide Sandra, and she's going to tell us all about this great neighborhood of Barcelona. This neighborhood is a great example of how a city can grow in medium density population with enough people to support your neighborhood shops, but not too many that it gets very crowded. It's a wonderful combination of medium density and a livable community. Something that was done 100 years ago, and we have not learned from this experience ever since in many of our American cities. So let's have a look and maybe we can learn something now.
There starts another important street, Passeig de Gràcia. Passeig de Gràcia is the boulevard where the wealthy industrialists moved to live at the end of the 19th century. If you had money, if you were somebody in the city, you were expected to live in that boulevard. It's the street where we find now the boutiques, Gucci, Armani, Chanel, etc. It's where we find beautiful examples of modernist architecture. A very few people live nowadays in that boulevard. Most of the buildings have turned into hotels, 4 and 5 stars hotels, or office buildings from banks or insurance companies. Because it's quite an expensive street to live. That's why it's more a commercial street, really. The extension of Barcelona is really a great design. The extension was designed by a military engineer, a Catalan military engineer called Cerdà, Ildefons Cerdà, who designed it as a grid of streets. So when you look at the map of Barcelona, or even walking on it, you notice it. It's a very logical way, the way it's designed, like a chessboard, or like the streets in New York. Streets perpendicular to the sea, not in diagonal, no narrow alleys, also big streets. And all the islands of apartments are octagonal shaped. It's all the same, all octagonal shaped islands, yes, with different stories. The islands have a big open yard in the middle, like a courtyard, because the buildings always have 2 facades. Let's say that building, that's already extension. This facade facing the street, but the same apartment has a back facade facing the courtyard, so where it's quieter. Facing the street, normally you have often the main living room, yes, maybe some bedroom, but normally in the back facade is where you have most of the bedrooms, also the kitchen, the toilets, like that. It'll be designed like that. The idea of this engineer, Cerdà, who designed it, was to improve the life quality of the people. For centuries, everybody lived in the old walled city, in those narrow alleys you saw, with lack of space, very small apartments, lack of fresh air, because there was no space, too many people, not good ventilation, no nature, no trees. The extension had to change that situation. Wide boulevards that permit to plant trees along the sidewalks, that permit to filter light and air in the apartments, larger apartments as well. So the life was supposed to be better there. And actually it's nicer. It's a very nice quarter. This is a boulevard. So the boulevards in this quarter have about 150 feet of width. But in the parallel streets, normally are smaller, 60 feet wide. Remember that this was the boulevard where the rich industrialists moved, they came to live. Actually, it was one of the first streets to be built. And here many houses were built in 1870s until 1880. In this crossing, we have the meeting with another big boulevard, or let's call it avenue, called La Gran Via, Gran Via. This is one of the longest streets of Barcelona. It's 6 miles long from south to north. We also have another longer avenue in Barcelona called Avenida Diagonal, Diagonal Avenue. Called like that because it crosses the city diagonally from the southwest to the northeast. In 1888, it was celebrated in Barcelona a world exhibition that was the opportunity to introduce into here really the modernism that had started in England with a movement called arts and crafts. And then some of these families that had houses built in this street in 1870s, in 1890, they say, I want also a modernist house, because that's trendy. So they had houses refurbished by modernist architects.